part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's quick hitting, local insight after every game. You can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. The Hawks Postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So when the turnovers returned, the game turned. We'll talk about that and our takes on the Hawks wrapping their road trip with a 117-109 loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight. And Tate, you said that your take on this Hawks-Cavs game was Hawks, quote unquote, sharing is caring just a little too literally.
Yeah, I think they got the memo that November has approached and arrived. I think where obviously this time of the year we start giving thanks and everybody's showing their appreciation for one another and showing a lot of love to one another. Well, that kind of feel like they kind of got the memo on that a little bit. Obviously, there's a turnover situation there, and of course, I know there's going to be a lot of people, which I guess it's okay. I guess it's okay to put an asterisk on it just a little bit, because obviously not having Trae Young, your primary ball handler, and just your straight up prototypical point guard, naturally born and bred point guard, and not having another piece. And we talked about how well Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been in that role and how much some contribution from Luke Kennard, who had another good night on tonight, but obviously him being more of a guy that's playing off the ball. But that this is something that they're doing by committee. And while we're definitely not one of this program to give excuses, one thing I will say is that a lot of the turnovers, while there was far too many of them, that has not been a consistent thing per se for the Atlanta Hawks. They've typically done a pretty good job anyways of taking care of the basketball. However, I will say enough to say a lot of them didn't appear to be unforced turnovers. A lot of them was just really good defense by Cleveland. And obviously you tip your cap to them, give them some credit. But for the Atlanta Hawks to be in the game the way that they are and that they were, and this ain't just against any opponent. This is against the team that I think had the best record in the NBA last year. Also a team that is contending for a championship, realistically, certainly contending position within the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
I'm not too mad about tonight, with the exception of some of the turnovers. I'm not too mad about it.
Yeah. And that is definitely one of the storylines that we'll talk about a little bit later. I think that when you look at this road trip, the Hawks are able to go 2-2 on the road trip. So it's a good thing. And you look at how competitive they were throughout the game. Definitely they were competitive and actually were able to win the first quarter and contend in all four quarters. It's just that it's one of those games where you kind of felt it slipping away and you never kind of felt like the Hawks were in control or that the Cavaliers were willing to concede control in the game. So I think that was kind of the challenge that we saw tonight, in addition to, as you talked about. And there were some other things that the Hawks maybe overcommitted to at times that kind of cost them the game, or underperformed areas they're underperformed in that kind of cost them the game as well. But for me, I kind of look at that bigger picture, and again, do not want to hit the panic button by any stretch of the imagination, because we know that it's still a young season. I mean,
yes,
the Hawks have still, the Hawks have still only played 6 games. And in all honesty, not that we ever want Trae Young to go down to injury, but if you're going to do it, at least do it at the beginning of the season, if you will. Because that gives every opportunity for you to come back 100% healthy when this team is continuing to get into the postseason. And yes, might hurt their chances a little bit in cup play. We know they started the road trip with a nice cup win, if you will. But ultimately, that's where my mind kind of went like, ooh, I think we didn't think at the beginning, and this is, of course, my take on it, but we didn't think this at the beginning. But now you're thinking, ooh, after tonight, it might be just a little longer, 4 weeks than we thought. And the 4 weeks I'm referring to, of course, is Trae Young. He's injured, got injured a couple games ago. He's now confirmed to be missing 4 weeks with a sprained MCL in his right knee. That was after the Hawks got an MRI, a second, and even a third opinion just to confirm that they knew exactly what the ailment was and just how long Trae will be out. And of course, we wish him well and want him to get healthy and come back 100%. But then you just kind of saw some struggles tonight. As you mentioned, Luke Kennard, an okay game in 32 minutes, 15 points on 5 of 6 shooting and 3 of 4 from 3. But Nickeil Alexander had an off night. He was 3 of 11, 0 for 4 from 3. So that's what kind of concerns me. And of course, Jalen Johnson had his typical double-double night. In fact, he had that double-double at the half.
Yeah, he did.
Then you could say to yourself, that's good and that's bad. Good in that he's giving you quality play at both ends of the court. Bad in that he already had that double-double going into halftime. So when you look at his final stat line and you see 23 and 13, and I think he had like 11 of those rebounds in the first half, then it kind of makes you wonder, okay, if Jalen Johnson cools off, where are those points going to come from, like in buckets? So that, I think that was my biggest concern with kind of finding out the 4 weeks, where the 4 weeks are going. If Jalen Johnson is going to be the primary scorer, that's fine, except if he does all of his damage in one half, then where are the Hawks going to look consistently for those points if Trae's not there? But I think the answer might be by committee.
And it is. And I think that makes for a very good point on many things that you said, especially considering the fact that, what the things that this might hurt the Atlanta Hawks from a standpoint of, playing for the cup.
Yes.
But obviously, this is a team that has its eyes set on something bigger than the Emirates Cup.
Yes.
That being said, this kind of reminds me in a very similar situation when Trae Young went down and the team kind of had to rely on DeJounte Murray to step up and kind of be that guy. Now, granted, we all understand that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not DeJounte Murray, but you could be in a lot worse situations not having somebody like a Nickeil Alexander-Walker to be able to step in, plug and play. And don't forget, being a guy that is in a Hawks uniform for, he hasn't even been in a uniform for 10 games yet. So I think that you have to kind of, have some grace considering all of the things. And I think that there were definitely a lot of good things that the Atlanta Hawks did, still continuing to shoot well from the field. I think is always a really positive thing.
Sure.
And we're out there rebounding as well. We talked about, how Jalen Johnson got off to a hot start, rebounding, kind of slowed back a little bit. I think that the Cavs kind of, clearly realize that if they get a hold a little bit on Jalen Johnson and send a guy out at him, clear, boxing out, different things like that, then they'll be able to, win this game, especially not having one of their better guys in Jarrett Allen, but certainly having, somebody like a Evan Mobley, who's I think defensive player of the year on last year, really, really helped them in doing so. All of that said, the Atlanta Hawks also, I'm still channeling my inner hungry hippo narrative, dumping the ball into the post, getting a lot of their, baskets converted in the painted area where it's just a higher percentage of a shot. I like the way that they're being coached. They just got to get Trae back.
Yeah, they definitely had a nice night in the paint, outscoring the Cavaliers 60-34. That's where, as you mentioned, they've been most effective inside throughout the season. And it's kind of helped them because they had another one of those abysmal nights from 3, 26% shooting from 3. So you got to make sure that you are as efficient as they are from the field. And of course, because they also had a tough night in another area that really, really does bite DeShaun's apple. So we'll talk about that. But ultimately, despite what the Cleveland Cavaliers did, it was one thing that the Hawks kept allowing to rear its ugly head that ended up maybe costing them in the end. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match. With Robinhood, you play for the win, not just on game day, every day, locking in on every opening. Beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, That's Robinhood.com/your money. Your money, your move. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Their zone deals are a game changer. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. You can even find NBA tickets for under $25. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but that's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by Rougiette. Let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress, I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED, designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. So visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNBA to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNBA. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNBA so they know we sent you. Rougiette, stop making excuses, start making moves. Well, DeShaun, maybe the peskiest number of the night. I know you have a runner up for that, but maybe the peskiest number of the night is 23. And normally when I think about 23, I think about wonderful things like Michael Jordan and all of his amazing play. But tonight, this 23 was not such a good 23. It's the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
DeShaun, this was an absolutely crazy game for the Hawks in that to start the game, they had 9 turnovers that first quarter. But as we always talk about, if you're going to turn the ball over, get back on defense so that at a minimum, you can keep your opponent from scoring off your missteps. Not tonight in that first quarter, especially 9 turnovers that turned into 23 Cavaliers points. And that was a huge turning point because we saw that inability to protect the ball come back to rear its ugly head against the Hawks time and time again tonight.
Yeah, that was extremely tough to watch and look at, kind of like I mentioned a little bit earlier about how, I didn't feel like there was a ton of unforced turnovers. Good defense, obviously, by Cleveland. You start talking about 23 turnovers. Not only is that far too many, but I do want to give the credit to the Atlanta Hawks in the sense of nothing is worse than turning the ball over and then not being able to get a turnover on your end of the floor. They were able to do that, turning Cleveland over 18. Usually when I think of 18, I either think about finally being old enough to have alcohol or Peyton Manning. I'm sorry, not alcohol, but consume of tobacco products. One of the two. Old enough to get into the grown folks club, put it that way. I will say also, Tenitra, that it's not the easiest job in the world when you're talking about trying to prevent turning the ball over and giving the ball up. Being a person that played a little bit of point guard in my day, just a little bit, obviously not on this big of a stage, but when that is your responsibility to know where everybody belongs, to know where basically to be that traffic light, to be that traffic signal, telling everybody when to come, telling everybody when to go, and also just kind of being that director of everything. And you can get put under a lot of pressure, especially by some really good guards from the opposition. Darius Garland being one that didn't play on tonight. This could have potentially been a little bit worse. But the Hawks did step up themselves and find a way to turn the ball over, try to match some of the similar energy, and showing that they're a better defensive team. I think that we have seen more and more as of these last few games, and obviously on the road. Why, Tenitra, are they just appearing to be, and this is where my optimism comes in at, appearing to be this better team on the road than they are at home? I don't know, but I'd much rather have it that way than going the other way where you're just that much better at home and just not that good on the road. I just feel like things will get a lot easier for you at home over time before they will on the road.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because a 117-109 loss on the road to the Cleveland Cavaliers, who, for all intents and purposes, were playing, I guess, like I'd say in the top four, obviously had the best record, but were probably playing the top four brand of regular season basketball last season, and bring back a lot of those characters. Obviously not Darius Garland, because he hasn't quite returned from toe surgery just yet. But ultimately speaking, the Cavaliers still had their usual suspects, their cast of characters right there to be able to do what they needed done tonight, including Donovan Mitchell. But yeah, I think you make a great point about the fact that the Hawks were still able to turn Cleveland over. The challenge there was that the Hawks didn't get as much productivity out of the turnovers from Cleveland, number one. And then number two, Cleveland was able to cover up their blemishes with those turnovers by how effective they were from three. So when you can turn the ball over as many times as they did, 18, but then you can shoot a quality 34% from three compared to 35%, compared to the Hawks 26% from three. And then that big chasm came from the free throws, 94% shooting at the free throw line for Cleveland versus 71 for Atlanta makes a world of difference as well. So that's where the challenge is. When you start giving away points through turnovers and free throws, it's like it's a little bit more difficult to overcome 26% shooting from three. So I think that's definitely something that has to happen. And I will say this much. I saw one of those comments asking us like, hey, did a random role player, let me guess, Robert was saying, did that cost the Hawks? I got to say, this go round, no, it really didn't. No, the two things, DeShaun, number one, no random role player except the other D-Wade really scored for the Cavs except him at 11 points. Yeah, and Ball got 8. Okay. But if you think about it, that balanced out quite well, because Quinn Snyder had a 9-man rotation. Luke Kennard, 15 points. Okongwu, 7, Gay 4, and Krejci 3. So the rotation that he used actually still put points on the board for the Hawks bench relative to at least matching what they got out of what Cleveland got out of their bench. Again, it's just being able to clean up those little things, if you will, and then just making sure that if Jalen Johnson is figured out, like if he's slowed down, if he has that hot start like he tends to do, he tends to have almost a double-double at halftime just about every game. But if the other team makes halftime adjustments and figures out how to take him off of his game, especially at the defensive end, who's going to pick up the slack, like who's going to clean the boards, and who's going to make sure that inside they're still dominated.
I'll say this in closing, Tenitra, that, and while that's definitely a good point, there's just so many positives. I really believe, and I'm not just saying, I really believe that there are a lot of positives to take away from this team, especially considering the fact that they're missing Trae. Because another piece of that, I believe, is that we haven't been talking about random role players since the season started at all.
No,
like we're almost 7 games in, and we have not even discussed that. I think that is a big plus, even as something that ain't going to necessarily show up on the stat sheet directly as saying random role player on an NBA stat sheet, only on ours, obviously. But I think that there's some good takeaways. They're shooting good from the field. They're feeding the paint. They're getting easy baskets. The defense isn't horrible. I mean, they're missing Trae. The turnovers, we could talk about turnovers tonight, but the turnovers hasn't been ridiculous over the course.
That's why it was so obvious tonight. Because when you've been averaging 10 through 7 or 6 games, and then you have 23 tonight, that's what kind of makes it a little bit more obvious that it was a negative.
Minor miscues, yeah.
Yeah, minor miscues. So yeah, like you said, still not a bad go of it for the Hawks. I will tell you, if a Traeless Hawks team goes 2-2 on the road, taking on the likes of the Cavaliers and the Bulls, which they lost to, but those were close enough losses, and then a blowout win against the Pacers, and you held on from a feisty Brooklyn Nets team to get a win. Yeah, I think you take that. I think you absolutely take that. I just hope that the 4 weeks are not too long until Trae Young gets back. The Hawks Postcast is the #1 place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and for more on the Hawks, head over to Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. And one more thing, just to clarify, when it comes to Trae, they're going to evaluate him in 4 weeks. So we're hoping for a good evaluation. But as we get more information, we'll share it. And of course, like we said, head on over to Locked On Hawks, the Postcast with our guy, Brad Rowland, for more deets on that. See you next time.